What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show here. Hang on a second. It is Thursday, August. Let me get back up here to the top here. August 10th. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. And we've got a lot of stuff to talk about here today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And unfortunately, our guest who was scheduled for today, Leon Siu, something came up. He is, after all, the foreign minister of the Kingdom of Hawaii, and he had to fly on over to Kauai. And he said we could still do the interview over the cell phone, but it was going to be very tight. And I said, look, for the sake of convenience, we're just going to push it into next week. But we are going to get him on the show. We just have to work within his schedule. I mean, he's the equivalent of a Secretary of State. And so we have to make some allowances on that one here. All right, so we're going to be able to take a lot more phone calls than normally would be the case here. And getting into the news here, of course, North Korea is talking about firing these missiles toward Guam. And it's really important because when it was originally being reported in the corporate media, they made it sound like North Korea announced they were going to actually strike Guam itself. We're coming to attack Guam. We're going to attack Andersen Air Force Base. And I had a real hard time believing that. But we actually checked with the English language version of the North Korean media, and what we found out is they're not threatening an attack. And this is an important thing to keep in your mind. They are not threatening an attack. They are announcing ahead of time another test. And they're going to be firing some missiles into the ocean down around Guam. But they're going to be in international waters, and they're announcing the test ahead of time, which is what you're supposed to do with a test. So that makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, we have everybody's out there saying, oh, this is an escalation, it's a provocation, they're going to attack Guam because that's where we have the bombers that we're going to attack them with. But it is important to understand the reason that North Korea announced ahead of time, it's not an attack, it's a test. Now, the fact that they're sending it down near Guam is, of course, a message to just not be flying their U.S. planes along their border anymore. They're getting sick and tired of all this saber rattling here. And, of course, from the U.S. side is, yes, we're ready to go here right now. And apparently the U.S. Pacific Air Force has announced to Trump and the world of, we're ready to fight tonight. We're ready to go. We're ready to bomb. And, yes, it is true. The U.S. can bomb North Korea right now. They could send in the missiles right now. But the reality is, for all the bellicosity coming on out from the Warhawks, and even CNN is admitting this, to actually mount a physical invasion of North Korea is going to require months of preparation. Because this North Korea thing kind of sprang up rather rapidly, and they haven't even begun to evacuate all of the thousands of U.S. civilians, get them out of the area. And it's going to take a large number of ships and troops to try and invade North Korea. Go back and look at the scale of the first part of the still ongoing, technically still continuing war against North Korea, which, by the way, the United States did not win that yesterday. But the U.S. is already out there saying that, they're going to use those bombers down on Guam, the B-1 Lancers and the B-2 Spirits, for a preemptive strike on North Korea. So it's the U.S. saying, we're coming to attack you, while North Korea is saying, stay cool, we've got another test that's coming basically your way. Now, South Korea has called an urgent security meeting after the North's newest threat, but again, it's not a threat, it's an announcement. And they may be making this announcement in response to the near miss from the last test, where supposedly their rocket came down, and then about 10 minutes later, another passenger jet sort of kind of went through near the same area. I mean, it's a wide miss, 10 minutes and miles. It's not like when the U.S. Navy accidentally shot down TWA 800 near Long Island. But North Korea may simply be saying, we're going to be testing these long-range rockets. We're going to aim them at this spot in the ocean near Guam and just make the appropriate changes to the flight paths. But everyone's trying to treat this, that North Korea is the bad guy here again. And SecDef Mattis is out there saying, you will lose. Okay, well, they haven't lost yet. You need to keep that in mind. This is a restart on an ongoing war that never ended before, and the United States did not win that war. So you got to keep that in mind. Now, a lot of people are starting to say that the problem isn't North Korea. It is the United States. And chairman of the German Socialist Party, Martin Schulz, who, by the way, is starting to pull ahead of Merkel in the polls, is saying it's Donald Trump's rhetoric that's fanning this up, that it's dangerous. And yes, Kim Jong-un could show a little bit more restraint, but we know the U.S. is trying to get into more and more wars so they'll have an excuse when the economy falls apart. And it does appear that China is changing their tune on North Korea. They were going to be on board with all those sanctions. Now they've gone around the other side. They've done a complete pivot, and China is now warning the United States to back off and go back to the negotiating table or risk a disaster. And it's not necessarily a direct military threat from China, but it is a recognition, and even the Pentagon is saying the same thing. A new ground war in North Korea is going to cost hundreds of thousands of American lives. Meanwhile, Americans, there's a revival of the bomb shelter business. Now, before the Cold War, in the middle of America, they called them storm cellars, tornado cellars. Now they're bomb shelters. And then after the Cold War ended, they were turned into wine cellars. And now they're being turned back into bomb shelters. And it's easy to do in some parts of the country. It's difficult here in Hawaii. There's a thin layer of topsoil that you can move around for roads and driveways and foundations, but under that is hardened lava. It is the consistency of poured concrete, and it makes digging anything of substance very expensive. But the business is on here. CNN is all of a sudden offering Hawaiians how to survive on a nuclear attack, and basically what they're saying is that the North Korean nukes are very small. That, yeah, if Hawaii gets hit by a North Korean nuke, not all that many people are going to die instantly. It's an acceptable amount of losses, but you do have to be prepared to deal with the radioactive aftermath. And I'm wondering why CNN is deciding it's going to be a concern here in Hawaii when all the rhetoric is focusing on Guam's here. But I think the article that came out of the Ron Paul Institute really says it best. Only morons are believing what the U.S. government says about North Korea, and that is absolutely true. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Jerry and... first of all, we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. Then we're going to go to the phones. Jerry in Chicago. Aloha. What's on your mind today?
Aloha, Michael. Thanks for taking my call. You mentioned something yesterday, I believe it was in the third hour, about the police and shooting dogs, and a good majority of them are good.
Yeah, I did make that point.
But every one of them in the Fraternal Order of Police Association knows of a bad cop.
Yes.
And they will not turn them in. It's sort of like the Freemasonry movement where Freemasons can do whatever they want, even commit murder, and it's up to the individual to decide whether he wants to turn somebody else in for that reason, you know?
Well, again, I think there's an undue amount of focus put on the Freemasons. I think they're being scapegoated for a lot of things that are actually being done by other people. And the reason I say that is we used to have a neighbor who was the master of the local lodge. And we got to go down there for a lot of events. And at one point, he even invited me to become a Mason. And I had to decline because in order to become a Mason, you have to profess a belief in a divine architect of the universe. And as I am an atheist, I could not in good conscience do that. And I said, I would love to be a Mason, but I'm not going to dishonor you by lying to get on in. And so that was kind of the end of that. But frankly, I wasn't all that impressed. It seemed to be an elderly gentleman's dinner club and not a whole heck of a lot more than that. And yes, they like their legends and their myths and their secret handshakes, but they're hardly alone in that. You've got the Oddfellows, you've got the Elks, the Knights of Pythias, and there's a lot of these secret fraternal organizations that have strange hats and strange rituals. And I guess in an era before movies and other such entertainments, it was just a way for guys to get together and play, act, and have fun. But I don't think that they're, and yes, it's a networking organization. And it allows people who have power and influence to network. But I think they're unduly propagandized against in order to shift onto them blame for things that are being done by some of the other secretive organizations we should be paying attention to, like the Bilderbergers and the one in California?
CFR.
Council on Foreign Relations and the Bohemian Grove and those people.
Well, I only use Freemasonry as an example, but I have quite a few friends that are cops, 2 of them that are retired. I'm sorry, 3. And I had put this question to every one of them. I says, you may have been a good cop for your 25-year stint. I says, but you did know of bad cops, but you never turned in those bad cops. Now, how do you feel about that? And they would you could see in their body posture, and cops are taught to read body posture. And, if you're a little bit pissed off about what they're talking about and everything else like that, they nail you on this stuff. And I could see this in their faces. I says, man, you lost all composure there. You can't answer the question. You got bad cops within your force and everything else like that, but you can't turn them in because you got that fraternal organization that you're all part of a membership of. You'll be castrated.
Well, there's a lot of groups that have that same kind of situation of we must protect our own. It's actually part of, for example, the Jewish faith, that you will not criticize a fellow Jew and you will not, report them for anything bad that they do. In fact, that's the whole reason the Anti-Defamation League was formed, was to protect Jews from negative publicity regardless of what they did. It was formed in response to this murder case where this Jewish business owner had murdered one of his employees, was found guilty, and then the Jewish governor of the state pardoned him, and it just was a huge, huge uproar. And the Anti-Defamation League was formed after that to exert pressure on the media and so forth in order to shield Jews from any negative criticism, regardless of what they were actually doing. So it's hardly unique to the police force.
Okay, well, like I say, I know that every cop knows of a bad cop. Whether they're a good cop or a bad cop, they know of a bad cop. And
no argument there. No argument there about that. Well, they're afraid of retaliation. I mean, look what happened with Serpico when he was trying to deal with the corrupt cops that he knew, and they wound up shooting him in the face. Again, I had a distant family relation who used to be a Los Angeles County sheriff. Unfortunately, he suffered a job-related accident, and he's now in another line of work. But while he was a sheriff, he didn't hide the fact. He was just waiting for the first opportunity he could legally shoot a black man. And it was just scary that this guy was out on the streets of Los Angeles with a gun and a badge, with this attitude.
Wow. Well, I'm sorry to hear that because, all men are created equal. I don't care about the color of their skin or their religion or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah.
That's all. That's a tidbit I wanted to drop in. I wanted to call you yesterday, but I was eating dinner when you got into that subject, so I didn't want to call you with a mouthful.
But I've heard a few stories from our neighbor who's with the HPD, and overall, I think we have a cooler, calmer, more aloha police force than you see on the mainland, but there have been increasing incidents. There was an incident, I think, about 6 months ago where there was a wounded dolphin on the beach, and one of the traditional ethnic Hawaiians was praying over it. Didn't touch it. It's a huge fine if you touch a marine mammal, even to help it. And there was a cop came up and challenged him, and however it got out of control, the cop wound up shooting the Hawaiian, who was just there to pray that this dolphin was going to get better. So we do have one or two bad ones.
And then probably shot the dolphin.
Not to the best of my knowledge. That would have been a $25,000 fine. He would have really been in trouble then.
Oh, yeah, then you get in trouble. But, hey, man, thanks a lot for taking my call, Mike. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
All right, I will, Jerry. Thanks an awful lot. Yeah, I mean, shot the Hawaiian guy. I'm not going to shoot the dolphin. Don't want to get into real trouble here. All righty, getting on to the domestic political front here. A federal judge has ordered a new search for Hillary Clinton emails related to Benghazi, including a search of the email accounts of Hillary Clinton aides at the State Department. The judge ruled the State Department hadn't done enough to try and track down emails sent pertaining to the Benghazi attack in 2012. U.S. District Court Judge Amit Mehta has ordered the department to conduct a search of the accounts for three top aides, Huma Abedin, Cheryl Mills, and Jake Sullivan. And Sullivan is the one where you've got the email from Hillary telling him to strip the classified markings off a document and send by non-secure means. That's a felony violation of Title 18, and it clearly shows intent. Now, I have a question here. We keep hearing that somehow all these emails were backed up on the cloud and the FBI already has them. Is the FBI sitting on them? Are they trying to bury them? And here's the real question. We've been told for years and years and years the NSA is collecting all the emails sent anywhere in this country. Don't they have Hillary Clinton's Benghazi emails? Are they holding them so they can blackmail Hillary in the future? Is that what the FBI is doing? It shouldn't be that hard to find these emails, given what we are told about the monitoring of our email systems. Now, the Justice Department has released Special Counsel Robert Mueller's finances, and it again confirms the fact he is not unbiased, he is not objective. Mueller's law firm has had clients like Facebook, whose CEO Mark Zuckerberg is no fan of President Trump and is already talking about running for the presidency himself. And Mueller was also paid handsomely for a speech at Mexican bank Banamex. So it's all those speaking fees again. He's not objective. And I'm glad that the Assistant Attorney General for the United States is yanking him in and saying, you do not go outside Russian interference in the election without our express permission. Now then, we have another dead body. Now this one doesn't go back to Hillary Clinton and the Bushes, but it's still kind of embarrassing. And apparently at the West Hollywood home of a high-profile Democratic Party donor and activist, Ed Buck, there was this gay male prostitute who died of a meth overdose in this Democratic Party donor's home. And the story is really kind of weird. Apparently this escort, Gamel Moore, they're saying the overdose was accidental, but apparently some of the other individuals who have been catering to the appetites of this Democratic Party donor is saying that for some reason he got off watching young blacks get high on meth, and he would encourage them to take more and more and more. And while he was watching these blacks go wacko on the meth, he would do his own thing. You fill in the blanks there. And it sort of reminds you that these people at the top levels of so-called society and politics and power, they can get really, really weird. And I saw a little bit of that myself when I worked in Hollywood here. Yet another, well, no, we're going to take a break for commercials. And when we come on back, we got more news from the world of election fraud. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And every time any organization anywhere in the United States starts to take a look at this issue of election fraud or irregularities, if you're trying to be politically correct, they're finding it. And apparently the Government Accountability Institute has gone on out And what they're looking at is this phenomenon of people who, since the last election, they've relocated to the state next door to get closer to work or something like that. And then when the election shows up, they vote in their new state of residence, and then they'll just drive back across the border into their old state where they are still registered, because nobody's checking to see if they left. Nobody's cleaning up their voter rolls, and then they'll vote again. And apparently, looking at the 2016 election, there were thousands of votes of people who were registered in 2 states and voted in 2 states, overwhelmingly for Hillary Clinton. They keep finding this everywhere they go. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Steve in Massachusetts, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I want to talk about the fiat money.
Yes.
And now with the sanctions against Russia, it seems like it's going to drive Russia to get away from the dollar even more, right?
It's already happening.
It's already happening. Mm-hmm. And, you know, if you have trade wars with China, they're going to do the same thing. So it looks like very soon we might have an economic reset.
I would say so. And by the way, have you seen the stock market today? Now, they're putting all the blame on Donald Trump's fire and fury comment. But past history has been that when we're getting ready for a war, for some reason the stock market will go up. But as of the last time I checked, I mean, the Dow is down something like 200, over 200. And what we may be seeing here is the beginning of the bubble bursting.
Yeah. Now, do you think everything's planned? Now, the reason why
not
I'm saying
very
that,
well,
because if you look at the Economist magazine, which is half run by the Rothschild, back in 1988, they had a magazine saying get ready for a new currency, new world currency, and it had a phoenix rising from burning fiat money, and it had a phoenix with a medallion that said 2018. Signaling that it's going to be 2018. There's going to be a new fiat, new currency that's going to arise. And I'm just wondering, is everything just planned out?
Well, they're not. It's not planned out very well. And I'm going to go back to the sanctions as a good example, because the U.S. is out there flinging sanctions all over the place, and it would be a good strategy if the world were still totally dependent on the U.S. dollar and had to go through the U.S. dollar for cross-trade and banking. But that world is gone. Already about half the world has turned away. And it would also work if other nations would join the United States in the sanctions. And that just stopped. The European Union has told the United States that they're absolutely not going along with these sanctions. So it wasn't planned out very carefully. Now, the globalists, the New World Order people, have been talking about a single fiat currency for the planet ever since they started talking about a one world government and a new world order back there when George Herbert Walker Bush was president. They were talking about this, the new world order. And but again, it's just going to be another private central bank, and that currency, the globo, is going to be loaned into circulation at interest to make us all debt slaves until humans go extinct. That's their plan.
Yeah, do you think they're going to get away from the fiat money and go to the cryptos? I already see Goldman Sachs buying one of the cryptos. And
wait a minute. Cryptocurrencies are fiat currencies. There's no value to them.
Well, there's no value to fiat money either. But I think it's their way of shifting, knowing that the fiat money is going to be destroyed, and their way of shifting towards something new, electronic. Easier.
Well, no. First of all, a lot of our current fiat currency moves by electronics anyway. The little plastic cards and the rest of it. What they want is a system in which you're not allowed to have any of your money in your pocket. The new model they're trying to that they will force on the New World Order is the banks own all the money, and any transactions you're doing with their money remain in their computers. And it makes it impossible for you to go to the bank and say, I want my savings account in my hand. That's the plan behind that. Steve, we got to let you go. It's
going to be more of the same then.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's why we can't let it happen. Steve, we're going to let you go. Take a break for commercials. Back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we take these phone calls here, a couple of things are breaking. Apparently, Trump is getting ready to come on out and make another speech about North Korea. And again, the Dow closed 204 down. So something may be getting ready to break there. Earlier in the show, we reported on how this judge ordered a new search into Hillary Clinton's Benghazi emails. Judge Andrew Napolitano is now reporting that the State Department and the Department of Justice are blocking access to the emails. They're refusing to go along with this judge's order. And apparently more information about Robert Mueller is starting to surface. Apparently when he was acting as Attorney General, he was blocking and shutting down every single investigation into anything connected with the Clinton Foundation, including the Uranium One deal. Mueller was closing all these criminal investigations without any recommendation for any kind of an indictment or a charge. The entire city is just woefully corrupt. All right, the phone lines are really loading up. Let's get some of the calls out of the way. Alan in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Just kind of pick up where you just left off on all the corruption. I came across a really, really good video that you might want to put on your website.
Okay.
It shows clearly the corruption. This is about a 6-week, I believe. This happened 6 weeks ago when Trey Gowdy was interviewing Jay Johnson, the old Homeland Security of Obama.
Yes.
Talking to him about Russia inclusion and all that. Well, anyway, right behind Trey Gowdy in the line of sight of Jay Johnson is the Juan brother. And he's looking at Jay Johnson the whole time, giving him the look of like, I got the goods on you, buddy. And as Trey Gowdy's asking him questions, he's nodding his head up and down and sideways. And every time he nods his head up and down, Jay Johnson answers yes. And then if you side to side, he says no. I mean, he's guiding him the whole way what to say and what not to say. I mean, it's incredible that an IT guy can be coaching a ex-head of Homeland Security on what to say, what not to say. I mean,
well, at this point, it's obvious the IT position was merely a cover, and the Iwan brothers were some kind of an intelligence operating unit. I mean, that's the reason they got their access to the House computer networks cut. They were caught breaking into these computers of representatives and copying off information. And he was apparently doing a lot of the same sort of stuff for Debbie Wasserman Schultz now. And again, it's just there is so much corruption in Washington, D.C., they can't keep it hidden any longer. It's starting to just overflow and come through the cracks, and everybody's smelling it now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's something that your listeners might want to see because it's just totally obvious. He's totally being threatened. And
well, if you could send me the URL to that video, yeah, I'll put it on up there. Now I know that the official response is, oh no, that's not one of the Iwan brothers. Obviously, an IT worker wouldn't, have the pull to be sit in the gallery or sit in the staffers area. But yeah, it does look like he did. That he's got the blackmail goods on everybody there.
Man, these guys are all dirty. It looks like. Everybody. It's incredible.
They are. They are.
But, okay, yeah, I'll send that out to your email yet?
Yeah, WRH at whatreallyhappened.com. There's a link at the top of the website that'll get you set up.
Okay, I'll get that out to you. Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks. We're going to switch over to Jerry in Wyoming. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I've heard you talk a lot in the past about when the whole system comes down to what we constitute, we want to make sure it's not done on a central bank system like the one we have now and not a fiat currency. I kept thinking, these central bankers aren't going to let this go that easy. I mean, they got plans to what's going to happen when this whole thing happens. And
okay, I think we just lost our connection here. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The owners of these private central banks, it's a family business. They've been running it for 300 years, and it has made these families the wealthiest people on earth. They're so wealthy they can stay off those lists about the world's richest people. They don't want to be on there. Because when you see a Bill Gates up there, as the world's richest man, you know what he did to get the money. You see somebody, a Warburg or a Rothschild, and they've got, this huge amount of money. You say, what did they do to get this money? And then they realize, well, they just ran this scam called private central banking. And it is time for it to fade away into history. Some countries are trying to break free from it, and inevitably they get attacked by the other countries that are still enslaved to the private central banks. That was basically what got us into World War II. Germany got rid of their private central bank. They went to a value-based currency, and all of a sudden, boom, we got to destroy Germany. Same thing with Libya. Libya they closed their private central bank. They established a value-based currency. Boom, we go into Libya. The private central bankers have enslaved the entire world. And just like the slave owners in the antebellum South, they are going to be very cruel and vicious to any slaves that dare to stand up and say, I think there's a better way. That's what's going to be going on. All right, we're going to take a call from Steve in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, you were talking about earlier, you mentioned electronic fraud, voter fraud,
yes,
election fraud, and it just something else I just noticed how the people are so trusting in this technology of, electronics, and they're giving up, normal ways of doing things to trust this technology. And just to give you a little example, I'm kind of a big tennis fan, so I've been watching a lot of tennis, and the USTA has an event in Montreal, Canada now called the Rogers Cup.
Yes.
And I noticed that they've ditched the old tossing of the coin at the beginning of the match to see what side, who serves first and who picks the side. They've aborted that whole policy of using the coin toss and gone to electronic coin toss, which is really interesting because if it's really important enough to do the act itself of a coin toss, then it must have some kind of advantage in some way. Maybe it's psychological mostly. I don't know. Maybe there's a benefit in some way. Who scores first or whatever, maybe in football or something like that. But if there's, the policy of doing a coin toss is now being thrown aside and we're going to do electronic, well, again, the system, we know the electronic system of voting is hackable. And if it can benefit somebody to win a coin toss in some way, then this system could be tapped into and changed.
No
I just
question.
think it's crazy how
I agree with you. What's wrong with the coin toss? And granted, yes, there are ways to rig a coin toss. They're very subtle and they're not reliable. But the idea of computerizing everything, that's when you're crossing the line from utility to decadence. And you say, oh, everything's got to be computerized. And some things, having a computer on them is going to be really cool. Others you don't need. Coin toss is a good example. Coffee maker's another. I stopped using coffee makers with built-in programmable this and that a couple of years ago, and I've got just your basic coffee press, and I'm quite happy with it. So, it opens up the possibility of fraud. And again, when you come to these elections, I know we've all been propagandized. Well, computers never make mistakes. Yeah, they do, because programmers make mistakes. And worse, computers can be programmed to lie to you. And we know that there's a huge amount of fraud with those electronic voting machines. And yeah, if I were a tennis player, I would say I would be a lot more comfortable with a good old-fashioned coin toss than this device, which, for all we know, is already preset to hand the advantage one way.
Yeah, I just thought I'd let you know that. It was the first time I've ever seen it, and it's probably going to be a regular thing now in tennis, maybe other sports, but I just think we're going in a very bad direction of you're inviting fraud. You're inviting fraud.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
Hey, thank you, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. How you doing?
Doing all right.
George Carlin said it best. It's a big club, and you ain't in it.
Yes, he
did. You
did.
ain't in the big club, and they're just there to push the buttons and pull the levers, and you are owned by your masters. And he said it. I'll tell you, man, that statement says it all when you watch him on YouTube.
Yes.
I mean, it's creepy. Hey, Mike. I wanted to talk about India and China. The first war they had, and started in the 50s, and India got spanked pretty bad. But what do you think about Britain? Even though India is kind of independent, what do you think Britain's involvement is antagonizing the Indians to start something with the Chinese? Maybe because of the Belt and the Road. I know there has some water right type of thing going on with water, but this Belt and the Road, India didn't join that.
No, India is building their own. That's the problem. India is building their own, and they're trying to get through the Himalayas to get this their version of the belt heading into Europe. And unfortunately, the way they had to go does in fact cross into Chinese territory. It's a very, very tiny amount, but the reason it's a big stink is that China is obviously seeing this Indian trade route as a major threat, eroding the profits they plan on making from having a monopoly on this new Silk Road. And that's what this is really all about. And it does look like it's going to come to blows. China is already telling people, civilians, non-combatants living near the border in that area, get the heck out now.
If India tries again, the Chinese will crush them. I mean, India is more prepared now than in the past, but the Chinese will just crush them, Mike. It's like, you just know, to do this again, you know, and then the first one was about a road, too. You know? Like, it's just amazing how, you know, history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme, doesn't it?
Yeah,
like
it does.
Things
but there's
come back around, you know?
A couple of things to keep in mind. Okay, first of all, India isn't now a nuclear power, and India has a huge population problem. And they would actually probably welcome a situation where they can take their surplus population, put them in uniform, and just send them into China. And China has to be taking that reality into account for their calculations. That a war with India, yeah, China might win, but the cost of victory might be a serious problem. I remember that back, I think it was during the Napoleonic Wars, where there was one of Napoleon's generals won a battle, but at huge, huge cost. And he wrote back to Napoleon and he said, one more victory like this and our cause is lost.
Is India's own version of, like, going their own way, is the U.S. involved in that, and Japan and stuff, I think, right?
I'm not sure to what extent, but obviously right now the United States would be very happy to see the Chinese and Russian monopoly on a new land-based trade route broken. And so I would imagine that one of the reasons India is willing to risk so much to complete this is they've already received indications from European and American companies that they would prefer doing business over this route than the one coming from China and Russia. The problem is, geographically, this route does not have the reach of China's belt in terms of getting to the Far East. But in terms of trade for Indian products, it certainly would have a tremendous advantage.
Yeah, because I looked and I saw, like, they even have, I mean, it goes into Europe, the Silk Road, Belt and the Road. I mean, that's a far-reaching, into Iran, and it's just amazing how quick. I think they said China uses more concrete in 3 years than we use in like 100, something like that.
Oh yeah, I mean,
crazy.
China's done some amazing engineering, like the Three Gorges Dam, and they certainly have the cement to work with over there. But basically, they're following the original Silk Road. So it's not like they're having to map out new territory. They're basically going on in and paving the already existing trade route. And for anybody who's traveling along there, it's going to be a very interesting experience because there are all these archaeological ruins of the way stations from the original Silk Road, and they're all still there.
Yeah, I watch a lot of the documentaries on YouTube. If I can get past those commercials for those night scope Dalek robots that they want to have as police officers. That's a creepy. It looks like it's a Dalek. You know, all they have to do is put like 50 calibers on them sticking out, you know.
Well, all you have to do is put infrared emitting LEDs all over your outfit, and the Daleks won't be able to find where you are. All right, Dustin, we're going to let you go. Switch over to Kathleen in Paris. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Over to Kathleen in Paris. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, there you are.
Yes. I have to be somewhere.
Oh, Yeah, well, when I turn the speakers down, then I can't hear you, and I'm never sure just quite how to do that. I see you there. I'm going back to this currency subject, and I listened to a disturbing interview this morning. It's on a YouTube site called SGT.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure what that stands for. Have you heard of digitizing physical goods?
I'm not sure the context. I mean, there are 3D scanners. They're sort of the front end for the 3D printers. If you want to make a copy of something, you can do a 3D scan of your face.
Well, this had to do with currency. The name of the subtitle of the interview was Checkmate, the bankers' new SDR crypto blockchain will enslave humanity.
Yes, I have seen that many places. In fact, we have linked it to whatreallyhappened.com. Yeah, this is talking about making all currency digital only. No coins, no paper, and again, it's just another way so that all of the wealth of the nation is in the possession of the banks for them to do with as they will. And any transactions you get paid for your work. It doesn't go into your pocket. It goes into the bank. You want to buy something at the market. Well, the bank will then transfer money from your account to the supermarket's account in exchange for the product. But the idea is there is no mechanism there by which you can have the wealth that you sort of technically own by virtue of your labor in your own pocket. And again, it's a form of control, and it's to guarantee that there won't be runs on the bank. Kathleen, I'm sorry. We got to take a break for commercials. We're going to let you go. We got a bunch of other callers waiting on the line, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show today, and we're going to go to the phones. Rick in Arizona, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Yo, Mark. This North Korea charade looks more to me like Wall Street henpecking Trump to stopping North and South Korea from quietly and peacefully reuniting. If North Korea could launch a missile, they would launch and hit Japan. Because when Japan went in there before World War II, they slaughtered those people without mercy.
Yes.
So, this is to make it look like if we have casualties in dealing with North Korea, that those people died for a good reason, that they saved us from being nuked from North Korea. See, if North and South Korea reunite, that's bad for Wall Street, because then you have the military industrialization of the South with the military power of the North, and then they can nationalize their companies and kick out all the hedge fund managers. I think I'm on the right track here.
Well, you're on a track, and certainly it's a factor. Like I said, wars are never started for just one reason. And in this case, the two Koreas were talking about reunification the way Germany had done about 5-6 years ago. And yes, the U.S. came on in and basically got in the way. And to prevent it from happening. But going into North Korea, again, it's more power projection, and there are rare earth minerals in North Korea, which the U.S. would like to gain access to break the Chinese monopoly. Certainly the CIA wants to get their hands on those opium poppies to go along with the ones they're getting out of Afghanistan. But you're absolutely right. A reunified Korea would be more resistant to outside influence by the United States. And again, look at what's going on in Germany today, where they're standing up to the United States and saying, we're not going to go along with your sanctions. We're getting ready to sanction you in retaliation. And the United States would like to keep all these countries broken up and at war with each other, because then they're easier to manage.
Yeah, well, just to the American people, you don't have to worry about getting nuked from North Korea. I mean, we didn't even have the ability to build an intercontinental ballistic missile. We had to use the German genius from Peenemünde. Okay.
Yes.
So it's not practical.
Well, so did the Russians.
Crap.
So did the Russians. I mean,
absolutely.
Yes.
The Russians didn't do it. It was the German scientists that went both ways at the end of the war.
Yes.
That gave Russia and the United States the power to go into space and come back down in and hit a target. And this is not capable over in Asia.
Well,
that's all I got today. Thank you, Mike.
All right, well, you're welcome, and you can hang up. Actually, the fact of the matter is that it being this far after World War II and the American and Russian space programs, many countries have developed space launch capability, usually for peaceful means. So rocketry, once you understand those basic principles, it's not all that hard. It usually comes down to a simple matter of engineering and metallurgy. You want, obviously, for any kind of a rocket, or for that matter, an aircraft, you want it as strong as possible with as light a weight as possible. And most of the goofs that you see happening come from making it a little too light, shaving off a little too much, and not understanding the forces that are on that fuselage. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification, and we got more calls waiting on the other side. I got to get a new mixer in here. Welcome back to the show here, hour number 2, and phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Let's take some phone calls here. George in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, how you doing, Mike? The thing is, I'm hearing Google and Amazon and all these big conglomerates becoming monopolies, and it seems like the Department of Justice is out to lunch on antitrust. And I really think for these antitrust and these monopolies, with unfair trade practices, censoring free speech and all that, I think we need to go to our state attorney generals and get them to start antitrust lawsuits, or find an good antitrust lawyer to bring a class action suit.
Well, it's a good idea. There's a couple of problems with it. First of all, these corporations have got so much money where they can keep the lawsuits tied up in court until we're all dead. More important, everyone remembers back to when they broke up the telephone company and what an absolute headache it was. So I think there needs to be a third course of action. That's when you're dealing with a national infrastructure of any kind, having a single entity does make sense, but there should be laws to basically avoid those unfair practices.
Well, I think like you talked about, like with a corporation, when it's chartered, that it has a birth date and it has an obituary date. So don't get too big.
Well, yeah. The other way to go is that for national infrastructure like the telephone company or the internet, everything, maybe it should be nationalized and taken away from the corporations. Now, I'm not saying that government management of these infrastructures is going to be all that smooth, given how well the government runs what it already runs right now. But at least you have the advantage that, at least in theory, it's being run as a public service and is no longer a privatized for-profit empire. And if we were to see that happen, the first thing I'd want to see it happen to is our medical industrial complex. I mean, prior to Richard Nixon signing the Health Maintenance Organization Act, hospitals and doctors and services, it was a service. And they treated you, and you paid the actual costs of the treatment, and there was a limit on the profit they could make on that. And today it's completely different. You've got a doctor, and behind them there's 20 or 25 administrators, all drawing salaries and all filling out paperwork to justify just how huge, the final bill to the inpatient is going to be. And that's why we've got the most expensive medical care on Earth and the worst quality medical care of all developed nations.
Well, Mike, I got to hang up the phone, but, I watched a movie the other day that, showed old school visual effects right before you got into the business. You heard the movie Earthquake with Charlton Heston?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love going back and looking at all those old special effects epics, that predate the use of computers and stuff. And, even my very first forays into filmmaking, we didn't have computer graphics. It was models and miniatures, and the only computers were operating motors to drive the models or to drive the cameras and models along tracks, and that was it. And we'd go home at night with paint all over our clothes and hot glue blobs in our hair, smelling of photographic fixer, and we felt like we were really artists. And I love what computer animation is able to do, but it sort of sometimes feels like a Dilbert comic strip when you look at the workspace.
Yeah. All right, Mike, I'll let you move on. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're going to switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I was on my way home. I heard on the radio some clown, some retired general, I think it was McInerney or something, and he's talking about North Korea like comparing it to Nazi Germany, as if they're going to go on a blitzkrieg. What are they going to do? Blitzkrieg their way through China? And maybe it's Russia. I mean, come on, have their own Operation Barbarossa. It's a small country. They're just trying to, they're probably more worried about protecting themselves than anything else. And the other thing is, before you comment, I'll just hang up after that to hear you. You were talking about the computer graphics. I just saw the movie, The Last Planet of the Apes, the most recent one.
Yes.
Are those computerized apes? They don't look like somebody in costume, or is it possible that they were actually used trained apes?
No, they're all computer generated. They're all deriving technology that was developed by Jim Cameron for Avatar, and it basically involves having real live actors with tracking dots all over them. And by the way, at the Screen Actors Guild, there is now a separate card distinction for CGI performers who will go on out and they'll act and they'll do whatever, but they don't actually appear on the screen. And so these scanners, they work in a special room, and the computers track their movement based on the marks on these leotards that they're wearing. And it even includes what are called facial Waldos, where they're tracking the actor's face, and they'll take all that data and then apply it to the computer models, which can then be of different proportions than the original actor. And that's how they get down to looking like apes or looking like space aliens as well. And that's how they get these incredibly realistic facial expressions. And it's a relatively new area of the technology. In fact, when I was working on Final Fantasy, it was just starting to be developed, and we did some of our actors' faces with it, and a lot of the background action with it, and it wasn't as sophisticated then as it is now, and it really is amazing just how rapidly it's moving forward.
Okay, what about the lead ape, Caesar? That was also computer animation?
It's all computer animation. It's all computer animation.
Okay. I was wondering. Okay. So I'll take your answer about the career offline. On the online. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, I actually forgot the question about Korea. We got off on Planet of the Apes here. All right, we're going to do shout out now to our on-air affiliates rejoining the network here. And we're going to go to George in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? I'm sorry. Where are we in the call list? We already took him, and we already took Mark in North Carolina. We're empty. Okay. Oh, the phone lines are open. Boy, I wish we had a Comrex stack system here. It's so much easier. All righty, let's get on back to the news here. The problem is we had two Marks in the list, and they both wanted to talk about Korea, and I lost my place here. All right. Apparently, a lot of people are taking note of this memo from David Brock over at Media Matters, and they got a lot of their money from George Soros. Somebody leaked it out, and it basically implicates, to nobody's surprise, Google and Facebook in the attempted takedown of Trump and the entire right-wing independent media. And I guess I'm considered right-wing because I was not a Hillary supporter, even though I see myself as more of a centrist. And if I have to put on a label, I'm a paleocon, which means I'm an old-fashioned conservative. Back when conservative meant you don't have the government go in and mess around with something unless it's really necessary, as opposed to the liberals whose starting point is, we're the government, we're going to tinker with everything just because we can. Now, there's a new book out in Germany, and it's called Gekaufte Journalisten, which translates as bought journalists, and it's about the CIA's media manipulation. And apparently it's a bestseller over there. And it is being suppressed throughout North America and Europe outside of Germany. Burn those books. Burn those books. The people can't know that the CIA is telling the corporate media what to tell you, like we didn't already know. All the way back to Operation Mockingbird. But they're still out there living in that dream world of the 1950s. Oh, yes, we've got the American people totally snookered. They believe the corporate media is objective and fair and balanced and will tell them when the government is doing bad things. It's amazing. Now, apparently one of the Clinton super PACs, or the Clinton super PAC, is now admitting, yes, they spend huge amounts of the money donated to them to pay internet trolls. And we've known this for a long time, but now they're saying, yeah, that's just part of the new reality. We hire people to go on out and cause trouble for anybody opposed to our agenda. So, the next time you are online arguing with somebody and thinking to yourself, how could anyone be that stupid? Just remember, they are being paid to be that way. And the real question is, how can anyone agree to look that stupid no matter how much they are paid? Even hookers have more integrity than a paid online troll. But I guess in the current economy, it's either be an online troll or go to work at a hamburger place. Although I have much more respect for the people at the hamburger place, as long as it's a good cheeseburger. Now then, getting on over to the war zones. Apparently the Syrian army has repelled yet another ISIS attack. And apparently ISIS suffered a lot of casualties. This was in the area of Humamya and the T2 pumping station at the Syrian-Iraq border. They're again fighting over that oil infrastructure. So that's one of the many reasons these wars are being fought. We've got to control the oil. We've got to make sure it's sold only for the U.S. dollar. So they have to come to the U.S. and borrow U.S. dollars here. All righty, let's see. Another phone call. Dave in Long Island. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I just have an interesting idea for an app that you can put on your phone that keeps track of all your congressmen in your district. Like what they're up to, when they go on vacation, any of the latest news about them, or anything like that, just so we can keep tabs on these people. And it would be a handy thing to do, and you don't have to go through a whole lot of mess of things to find out what these people are actually doing.
Well, it sounds to me like what you're talking about is an aggregator from the Congress Critters' own websites, because anything they're doing they don't want to be public is going to be very, very difficult to get at. I'll tell you a simpler idea, and I've said this before. I think every member of Congress ought to wear a fireproof racing suit on which are sewn the patches of all their top donors. So when you look at them, you know who they're really working for. You know, and they're going to look stylish and snazzy, like the NASCAR drivers, you know, but I've got, you know, Monsanto up here and Israel, always Israel. Israel's going to get the prime real estate on most of those jumpsuits.
Well, that sounds great, and it's pretty humorous, actually, but not really too practical, whereas an app and somebody who collects all this data seems like a pretty simple thing.
Well,
somebody you know.
Again, the stuff that these members of Congress want you to know is easily available at their website, and you could aggregate from there. The stuff that they're up to that they don't want you to know, that's going to be very, very difficult to get at. There's a, you know, this idea that they have is they have a right to privacy because they're members of the government, but you don't have a right to privacy because you're the enemy of the government, at least right now, until you agree to do what you're told to do. Dave, we're going to let you go. Thank you very much for the suggestion.
Thank you.
And getting on back to Syria, interesting little article from RINF.com. America's military cannot bring peace to Syria. Well, let's be very honest, America's military don't bring peace anywhere. Do you remember the movie Dr. Strangelove, directed by Stanley Kubrick? And during the sequence where they're trying to break into this base from which General Jack D. Ripper has launched a nuclear attack at the Soviet Union. And in the background of the fighting, there's this billboard, saying, "Peace is our profession." And yes, that was an intentional joke by Stanley Kubrick. Boy, the phones are just ringing today here. We're going to go to William in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael.
Hello, William.
I was wondering, I've been reading some of the posts here and other places, and people are concerned about money. How are they going to buy food? How are they going to live?
Yeah, it's a problem. I mean, the other day, Claire and I were out doing errands, and the car parked next to us in the parking lot. Clearly, they're living out of that car. Everything they own is in that car. They've lost their home. But at least they have the car. A lot of the homeless in Hawaii don't even have that.
Yeah, well, my question is, what is an alternative to money in this world?
Well, basically, money is a medium of exchange, and it's existed in various forms, going a bit back to barter. But again, money is whatever any two trading parties agree to use as a common currency. White seashells, pennies, whatever's going to go on here. The problem is that this country was set up with an honest monetary system that served the nation and its people, but 3 times it's been hijacked by the bankers who want to privatize the monetary supply in order to generate profits for them. And every nation that has one of these private central banks that loans the currency into circulation, we wind up with a class with tremendous wealth inequality. And it's the very system we fought the revolution to break free of, only to be sold back into its slavery by a corrupt Congress and a corrupt president 100 years ago. And I'm looking at the fact that because public awareness is growing, that this private central banking is exploitive. It is looting and plundering the wealth of the people, that the work product of the people always winds up in the pockets of the bankers because it's designed that way. And I think that when the big crash is on us, that most Americans are going to be amenable to the idea of standing up and saying, no more private central banking. Let's go back to a system of a value-based currency where we don't have the bankers just constantly shaving off a percentage of the nation's wealth month after month after month after month after month after month until nothing is left.
Well, it's a nice idea, but I just, I don't see how we're going to get to that place there.
Well, we're going to have to just sit back and wait for it to self-destruct. And again, look at the model of the Soviet Union. We're seeing very many of the same symptoms here in the United States of America that were visible in the Soviet Union in the months before it all fell apart. And what we have to be prepared to do as American citizens is put our foot down. When the current system comes crashing down, there's going to be all these carpetbaggers going to come on in and try and restart the same scam again. And we're going to have to say, no, we're not going to do that. And anybody who comes on in saying we need a new private central bank, we give them a good thick coating of tar and feathers, and we run them out of town on a rail, preferably redwood, because they leave really deep splinters.
I think you're an optimist there for the American public here. But,
well, yeah, I have to be. I have to be. It's the only way I could have been doing this for as long as I've been doing this.
Okay. So, hey, may I say God bless you, even though you don't believe in that supernatural...
Of course you can. I appreciate the sentiment, and I appreciate the intent. I'm not offended by things like that, and thank you for the kind words.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. We're going to switch over to Tom in Florida. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, good day, Michael. First off, Michael, I think that guy should watch that movie Under Thunderdome when they were looking for petrol. That's the way barter works, Barter Town.
Yeah.
It'd be a good movie for him to watch with Mel Gibson Thunderdome. But, hey, Michael, I want to ask you first off, I just think I heard something about Nancy Pelosi ran over some kids. Is that true? Did you hear anything about that?
I have not heard anything at all about that.
I'll
I'll check it on this next commercial break here, but I've heard absolutely nothing about that.
Yes, I think I heard some of the story just now. I was on the radio. I heard something about Nancy Pelosi running some kids over. I think it was Pelosi. I'm not sure. That's why I'm going to check it out myself. But, yeah, the reason I did call you, Michael, is this is very important. Listen, they have a Spanish radio
okay,
down here.
Tom, going to take a commercial break. Do not hang up. I'm going to come back to you after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before we go back to Tom in Florida, I did check. And, there's a hoax fake news story about Nancy Pelosi having an accident and testing positive for cocaine. But it is a hoax. One of the tactics the corporate media is using to try and call the independent media the fake news is they're setting up their own websites that do nothing but put out nonsense stories. They're not humorous. They're not satirical. They're putting them out there trying to make them as very convincing as possible so the corporate media can say, oh, look at this ridiculous story. It's all over the independent media. No, it's only on these sites that we know are pumping this tripe out, and it certainly was not on whatreallyhappened.com. It's a propaganda technique called poisoning the well, and that's apparently where this story originated, and it is false. All right, so, Tom, we're talking about, I think, North Korea?
Yeah, that's right, Michael. I figured that story probably was a little false because I didn't see it on a couple of networks. But, talking about Kim Jong-un and the insanity of this guy when he killed his own family with mortar cannons and all that.
Well, hang on. We have to be very careful because everything we think we know about Kim Jong-un is being fed to us by the same people who told us Saddam had nuclear weapons. Remember back when they were screaming that Iran's Ahmadinejad was threatening to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, and it turned out he didn't say it. They were making all kinds of claims about Saddam when that war was ramping up, about how he cruelly killed animals and they ate the raw flesh, and there was all kinds of nonsense being fed out there. Now, I'm not saying that Kim Jong-un is a nice guy, okay? He seems to have all the personality traits of a classic nepet, and there are sometimes I wish he would zip his mouth a little bit. But we got to be very careful about what we think we know he has done in the past, okay? So,
yeah, you're right, Michael.
With that in mind, let us proceed.
I agree with you, but the only thing that is, he did, the airport thing with his brother getting killed by the two women, I don't know if that was fake or I don't know what that was going on with that. But
well, and again, we don't know. Yeah, that one was definitely real.
Yeah, with the brother, with the whatever they poisoned, how they poisoned him. But the thing is, though, Michael, if this guy were to shoot off missiles toward Guam, I don't believe they'd hit Guam or even come close. And the Japanese, I do believe, would take them out. But if that does happen, I don't think it's going to be a pretty picture for the Korean Peninsula.
Okay, well, let us back up here and one more time say that what North Korea is saying they're getting ready to do is another missile test that will hit the ocean down around Guam. They're not announcing that they're going to strike Guam. They're saying, we're having another test. Please stay out of the way. And the corporate media, again, Saddam's nukes. Oh, he's going to attack Guam. And they're frothing at the mouth. And that's why you got to be very careful about just accepting what the corporate media is saying North Korea is doing. Because, I mean, again, go back and think about it. Would it make sense for Kim Jong-un, if he was really going to attack Guam, why advertise it ahead of time? It just gives the military more an opportunity to bring in more defensive assets, or to just go on ahead and do a preemptive attack on North Korea. It didn't make any sense for North Korea to say, we're coming to attack Guam, and as it turns out, that's not what North Korea said. It's what the corporate media says North Korea said, but what North Korea was actually... I'm sorry?
No, it's fake news. I agree with that.
Yeah, okay.
I agree with you there.
Okay.
But, Michael, one more thing. this is not fake news. Or maybe it is. I don't know. But I remember like 7 years ago, I read in the paper, and I believe it was the USA Today. I'm not positive if that was years ago, but I did remember reading where 2 or 3 high official generals for the Chinese military said, if we were to go into a nuclear war and they knocked out half our population of China, they would actually be doing us a favor. I don't know if that was more fake news back then, but I remember reading that story where the Chinese are actually saying, bring it on, because you knocking out half our population, you're going to be doing us a big favor because we're overpopulated in China.
I've heard that comment before, and leaders of nations that have a lot of, and even George Bush was talking about, getting rid of the useless eaters. And that's the way they think. They view us as a herd of animals, and there are the ones who are useful, and the ones who are not, we got to get rid of. Tom, got to let you go. Got to take another break for commercials. We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to take a phone call from Tony in Puerto Rico. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hello, Mike. Yeah, Mike, I want to make a quick comment, and I don't want to cast aspersions on any religion. But we know that today you could tell a person is Jewish by their last name, right? Stern or Sternberg, etc. Now, during the Spanish Inquisition, how did they know who was Jewish or not?
I don't really know. And first of all, I'm going to back up and say that you don't really know if a person is Jewish by their last name, because there are so many converts. When you're dealing with the names, you're dealing with certain ethnic groups. And they may have gone on to other religions. I have a very good friend on this island who's got a very Jewish-sounding last name, but their religion is Protestantism. So I get really nervous about just saying, oh, yeah, you can tell who's Jewish by their last name. I mean, I didn't find out Rivero was Sephardic until I was quite late in life. I had no idea where the name came. I thought it was, again, from my family history, that it came from Portugal. And I didn't realize that the story actually went back further than that. And I don't mean to cut you off on that, but, you got to be really, really careful. So how did the Spanish Inquisition tell if somebody was Jewish? And by the way, I'm no friend of the Spanish Inquisition. They were very unpleasant to my ancestors.
Okay.
So how did the Spanish Inquisition decide who was or was not Jewish?
You asking me?
Yeah.
Okay. I felt the same way by their last names.
Well, I think back then it may have been a little bit more accurate, but again, in this day and age, during the era of immigration into the United States, a lot of people, knowing how hostile Europe had been to Jews, would change their name. And I don't think you can really tell by that. Anyway, thank you for the phone call and that little bit of history.
Okay, Mike, thank you.
We're going to let you go here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Yeah, I get really nervous when somebody comes out and says, oh, you can tell who's Jewish by their name. No, not always. I don't think those Ethiopian Jews have names that you could say, oh, obviously, Ethiopian Jew. All right, let's see. Over in Syria, we're still in Syria again. And apparently one of the international war crimes prosecutors, Carla Del Ponte, has resigned from her position on the United Nations Investigative Panel into Human Rights Abuses in Syria. And apparently the story is she has quit out of sheer frustration because every time they think they have a case against Bashar al-Assad for some kind of a human rights violation, it always tracks back to the U.S.-backed rebels. And then they have to quit and start all over again looking for something else. And I guess this lady just had enough and said, it's just not there. And it's all Russia's fault. So she's out of there right now. Here's an interesting little story, and it's another reminder of why wars are so expensive, which, if you're inside the war, you love that kind of thing. There was a British company hired by the U.S. military to train Afghan intelligence officers. And apparently this British company just took $50 million of the money given to them by the United States and spent it on supercars. I guess they're fans of Top Gear. and hiring the boss's wives at six-figure salaries. So this company, New Century Consulting, spent another $42,000 on automatic weapons. They bought a couple of Porsches, an Aston Martin, and again, the significant others of the firm's top executives were getting six-figure salaries. There is no indication they ever did any actual work. Now, over in Lebanon, their army is targeting Daesh, ISIS, on the outskirts of Ras Baalbek and Al-Qa, ahead of an anticipated offensive. So the reality is the U.S. forces inside Syria are losing. The covert ones, not the overt ones, but the covert ones. And apparently, as we reported yesterday, the Pentagon is admitting a lot of these rebels that they spent your money to arm and train have now gone over to the Syrian government side. Up in the Black Sea, a fourth Russian submarine has now arrived in Crimea to join the Black Sea Fleet. One of the reasons the United States was so angry over the Crimean referendum was the idea that they were going to get rid of Ukraine's elected pro-Russian government. They were going to put in President Chocolate, and President Chocolate was going to tell the Russians, you're not allowed to use Crimea anymore. And that didn't quite work out because Crimea voted to secede from Ukraine, voted to merge with the Russian republics, and Russia still has a legal, legitimate reason to have a fleet in that Black Sea. Now, there's a story coming on out that Turkey has detained a Russian citizen for allegedly plotting an attack with a drone against one of the U.S. planes based at Incirlik. And the channel identified the Russian as Renat Bakiev. He's also suspected of involvement in the terrorist organization Islamic State, which is outlawed in Russia. The Russian embassy in Ankara is looking into the reported detention. So a lot of stuff going on over there. And I wonder if this individual had succeeded in damaging a U.S. plane at Incirlik, who they would have blamed for it. ISIS? Turkey? Remember, Turkey is starting to show signs of pulling out of U.S. control and pivoting to Russia. So a lot of people are out there saying, that, especially with the situation in North Korea, be ready for a false flag. Set off a bomb someplace. And one possibility that is being suggested, this is over at the Corbett Report, is called a black sky event, which is a code phrase meaning an electromagnetic pulse event, where somebody could launch a nuclear weapon out of the Earth's atmosphere above the magnetosphere and detonate it, which would create this magnetic pulse, which would knock out power systems and electronics for a very large area underneath it. Now, ironically enough, here in Hawaii is where they first discovered EMP effects, because this was back in the heyday of the nuclear testing in the South Pacific. And as one of the tests, they wanted to launch a nuclear weapon out of the atmosphere and detonate it just to see what would happen. And they did, in fact, find out that it would create this electromagnetic pulse because the power stations and radios and everything here in Hawaii all got knocked out. That's when they discovered this electromagnetic pulse. So they could launch a nuke over Guam, over Hawaii, someplace that wouldn't suffer too badly, set it off and say, oh, North Korea just did an EMP attack on us, the war is on. And we do have to be aware, first of all, we know false flags are a reality in history, and we know how desperate the U.S. is to get a major war going, so they've got something to blame for what appears to be an imminent financial crisis. Apparently, Russia is going to sign a military cooperation deal with Niger, And I'm sure that Russia's being told that people in Niger have got millions and millions of dollars they need to smuggle out of the country, and they want Russia's help, and all Russia has to do is send a small trust courtesy deposit. I don't think the Russians would fall for that. That was an attempt at humor. Please forgive me here. Apparently, Israeli forces last month in July detained a total of 880 Palestinians. 144 of them are children. And these are all administrative detentions. They have not been charged with any specific crime. They're just rounding these people up, sending them off to be imprisoned, and in many cases tortured. It's a campaign of terror. And apparently Israeli settlers, not having succeeded in wresting the Temple Mount away from the Palestinians, have gone on a rampage in the village of Safa in the West Bank, burning Palestinian cars, vandalizing property. And as usual, the Israeli soldiers just stood there and let them do that. A little bit of a warning over here from the Duran that there are some indications that Israel may try and invade Egypt again. Wouldn't be the first time. Israel wants that Sinai. They want Egypt up to that Nile River, part of Eretz Israel. Apparently the U.S. is beginning these illegal deliveries of lethal offensive weapons to Ukraine. This is from Veterans Today. Just fanning up the flames of war. Meanwhile, over at the United Nations, Nikki Haley is actually on her way to Vienna to try and lay the groundwork for a claim by the United States that Iran is not, in fact, in compliance with the P5+1 nuclear deal, or at least with the spirit of it. That's the new argument. There's no evidence that Iran has violated the explicit terms of the P5+1. The IAEA just came back from another inspection and said, yeah, they're playing by the rules here. So the new propaganda we're getting out of Washington, D.C. is, well, Iran is violating the spirit of the deal with their evolving of defensive missile systems. And so Nikki Haley is heading on over there. And again, we keep hearing this timetable. 1st of September for North Korea, 1st of October for Iran. Apparently, Trump has provoked China again. He sent another destroyer to the South China Sea, the USS John McCain. I'm not sure if it's named for the senator or his father, who also had the name John McCain. But again, violated the territorial waters of this artificial island built by China. It's another provocation. And China sent their military forces to shoo that U.S. ship back out into international waters. This may be the reason why China decided to stop cooperating on North Korea. Remember, everybody was actually kind of surprised when China said, yeah, we'll go along with the sanctions against North Korea. And then all of a sudden we're hearing China telling the United States, back off from North Korea, return to the negotiating table. And that's the right thing to say until you realize the United States does not want to negotiate. The United States government needs a major bloody war as a distraction from the coming economic crash. And they've done it twice before. Crash of 1907, World War I. Crash of 1929, World War II. Crash of 2008, here we are on the very doorstep. Now, as I mentioned to a caller earlier in the day, the Indian Army is now ordering their people near the border with China to vacate the village, as it is quite likely to become part of the battleground for China's apparent build-up to push India back to their side of the border. And technically, yes, India is in the wrong, but it's a very tiny violation. But obviously the real threat is economic. If India can build this transit road, this shipping road, this belt, it will cut into the profitability of China's project. And that's why China is making a big stink about this. Now, the United States is imposing yet more sanctions on Venezuela, not on the oil, but they're now sanctioning all of the members of the newly created Constituent Assembly. And again, this Constituent Assembly is in the Constitution of Venezuela. Maduro did not do anything outside the letter of the law. But the U.S. government and the corporate media are trying to seize on this as some dramatic reshaping of Venezuela's government to help Maduro. And yes, that's what he's doing, because the National Assembly, the opposition members in the National Assembly are blocking everything Maduro is trying to do, just like the obstructionists in the U.S. Congress are doing to Donald Trump. And Trump, unfortunately, has to live with that. Maduro does not. The Venezuela Constitution says, yes, if you've got a National Assembly that is continually deadlocked, you can have this new super legislative body. And that's what they did. Apparently, violence in the streets of Venezuela is continuing. And again, I want to remind everybody, a couple of weeks ago, the head of the CIA admitted this is a U.S.-backed regime change operation. So the violence is all over, and the Venezuelan military is now using prisoners that they've captured from the uprising to try and clean the streets of Caracas from all the debris and from all the rioting and the looting and the vandalism going on here. Meanwhile, Henry Kissinger, who's another one of those people I wish would close his yap, is out there saying the West should sustain aggressive engagement abroad. More wars, more blood. Here's your rifle, Henry. Somebody the other day made this comment about how, the people in the U.S. government are just dying for more war. No, they're not. They're not going to fight those wars. They're not going to die in those wars. It's your kids who are going to be dying for the wars they create. And your grandchildren will be paying back the loans. Now, getting into the economic news here, they're calling it the death spiral. Apparently, 6.5 million people are paying the IRS tax penalty rather than buy Obamacare, because those Obamacare compliant policies are pretty much useless. They are expensive, and the sky-high deductibles mean that the average American, unless you have a major illness or injury, you will go through the entire year of normal medical care, and you'll never get any benefits from the insurance policy because you won't use up the deductible. And so a lot of people are saying, why bother with the policy? The IRS penalty is less expensive. And we know what's going to happen next if Obamacare is not repealed. The IRS penalty for not having an Obamacare policy will be the same cost as the Obamacare policy. One way or the other, they're going to take your money away from you and give it to the health insurance industry as bailouts, probably. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. I'm going to pull away from the economic news for just a bit. I want to fit a couple of things in here. The corporate media is making a big deal over the fact that this Virginia student has been sentenced to jail for 100 days for fraudulently registering non-existent Democratic voters. And they're focusing on this story, and the implied message is, yeah, there was some shenanigans in last year's elections, but this was pretty much it. Because the corporate media is not reporting on all these other organizations that are finding millions and millions and millions of questionable votes. Yeah, there was a little election fraud. It didn't change. Hillary still won the popular vote, and we put this kid in jail. It's called a limited hangout. That's a propaganda term, where you admit partially that, yes, something bad was done in order to make it easier to keep the really big crime hidden. But they're still lying to you. And another big lie that's all over the corporate media right now is that supposedly somebody has done a poll showing that most Americans favor sending U.S. troops to North Korea to defend South Korea. Now, anybody who is in a family of somebody who served in that first part of the Korean War, they're not going to go for that. And I have not found anybody in my day-to-day travels around this island, And we got a lot of military people here. They absolutely don't think the United States has any business in North Korea whatsoever. So it's, again, and they did the same thing before Iraq. Oh, polls are showing Americans think we should go into Iraq. You want an honest poll? You go up to somebody and say, are you willing to go to North Korea to defend South Korea? You personally. That'll get you an honest response. Very easy to say, oh, yeah, when it's somebody else's kid, somebody else's money. All right, getting on back to the economic news. Applebee's is having a massive closing. 135 of their restaurants are about to go away, and all those jobs are going to be lost. You probably have already seen the commercials from Allstate Insurance, where they're now letting you file your claim online with your smartphone and just take a picture of the damage. And behind that is that Allstate is laying off 500 of their insurance claim adjusters who would normally go on out, look at the damage, estimate what the cost is, and they figure they're going to be money ahead just letting the computers do it. So those people are going to be out of a job. The United States Postal Service is looking at a $2.1 billion loss. It's an increase of more than $500 million over the same time period last year. So get ready for a hike in the postal rates. Now, we've talked before. Oh, there's the music. Got to take a break. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And everybody's making a big deal over this giant inflated balloon on the White House lawn that is a angry chicken with a Donald Trump-style haircut. And apparently the artist who made it spent about $5,000 on the materials. And they're trying to send a message. He's really a chicken. Obviously, the war hawks are behind this. All right, we're going to get back to the economic news. We have been talking about these high-frequency trading algorithms used by the main Wall Street firms. Now, the first time that they were tried was back in the 1980s, and it drove the market into instant instability and resulted in a major slide on the market. So they were banned at that point. But more recently, the government has been saying, yeah, we need to let the big Wall Street firms have these things because they're responsible. They won't do anything bad with them. And the idea is that normal people like you and I, when we're working with the stock market, not that I personally have any stocks, the data that we get on the stock prices is delayed. Anywhere between, I don't know if there's an official limit, but generally it's lagging several minutes behind. And that's designed to prevent people from trying to ride the market and get ahead of the trade. These large Wall Street firms are now allowed to hook their computers directly into the computers of the stock exchange. There's no delay for them. And they can place their buy and sell orders at extreme rapidity. One of the ways this has been abused is to churn the accounts of their clients. And by churning, meaning doing a lot of trading back and forth and then charging the client the brokerage fees as a result. Something you need to be aware of. Well, apparently J.P. Morgan has a brand new and improved high-frequency trading algorithm, and they are getting ready to put that into action. And as a result, a lot of their human analysts are going to be let go. The motivation is, of course, profitability. And they're already signaling they're going to get this thing going, and they're not going to need those pesky human stock analysts. Australia's Commonwealth Bank has announced bumper profits, but at the same time, it's also embroiled in a legal tussle over how much it tells shareholders about its exposure to climate change, which is really kind of getting out there. Ultimately, we're all exposed to climate change. But I guess the shareholders are concerned that Commonwealth Bank is not taking climate change into account with enough priority in deciding where and where not to invest their money. Over in Great Britain, there's a new study, according to, well, in the years since the Conservative Party took over, the Tories, the UK homeless population is continuing to grow. And according to this article that came out of the Mirror, they're finding out there are twice as many people sleeping rough in Tory Britain as previously thought. And this is a study coming out of the Heriot Watt University at Edinburgh. And they're saying the reason the numbers weren't really understood fully before is that, yes, there are a lot of people sleeping rough, which is the British term for homeless. They're sleeping on the streets and in their cars and so forth. But apparently there are people who have lost their homes, but they have a large network of relatives and friends, and they simply sort of rotate from house to house to house. They'll spend a few days there, move on, spend a few days there. So they have a roof over their head, but they're technically homeless. And they have been missed in all the earlier studies about how many people have lost their homes in Great Britain. And there's already a new slang for it, sofa surfing, where you're basically sleeping on your friends' couches. And apparently they counted at least 68,000 people who are getting by doing that, by sofa surfing. Now, here is my point of view on that. And like I said the other day, we have a lot of homeless on this island. 8,000 is the new number. And yesterday we saw somebody who's clearly living out of their car. You cannot look at that and say this is a functioning economy. Yes, it's functioning for the ultra-rich, but shouldn't an economy be functioning for everybody? That's something for all of you to think about. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Roger in Ohio, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, I live in Ohio, northern Ohio, and our economy has picked up just a little bit because it's been so down for so long. So we're finally seeing some construction going on. But the latest big thing that they're talking about now is opioids, the drug problem with the heroin and all that.
Yes.
And they want to spend a lot of money on that. And we're going to have three DEA agents that work in our county now. So, I mean, they're gearing up with this legalized marijuana, but boy, they're going to have to spend the money someplace else.
Well, when you talk about the opioid crisis, it's not just the illegal street heroin. There is a problem where apparently there's so much opium coming over from Afghanistan, it's being pumped through the pharmaceutical corporations into legal prescribable opiates, and doctors are being encouraged to prescribe it. And as a result, we're seeing, high rates of addiction among patients who were told to take these pills by their doctors, and we're even seeing overdose deaths. So that is a major problem. I'm glad things are looking a little better in Ohio. I mean, the economy is going up and down in a lot of areas, but overall, I think we're in worse condition now than the Depression of the 1930s. Going off on a complete and total tangent, how far away are you from New Philadelphia?
That's quite a ways. I'm outside Cleveland. So
oh, okay. All right.
Hey.
All right.
I have a good place for you and Claire to locate to when you come stateside.
Well, if we get
a town called.
Go ahead.
Tullahoma, Tennessee. Check it up on Wikipedia. It'd be a perfect spot for you and Claire.
Well, we'll take a look here. I mean, if we can get together the money to get back to the mainland, I'm looking at something like, around Indiana or maybe somewhere between Indiana and New England, because we've got family in both places, and just someplace quiet and away from a first strike nuclear target. The reason I was asking about New Philadelphia is when I was very, very, very young, and my family was moving around a bit because my father was into manufacturing and he was getting all these jobs with these various companies. And I spent a year in New Philadelphia. And I think I was in first grade. when I was in New Philadelphia, and I remember for the Christmas that was there, buying a carving board for my mother as a Christmas gift, which I actually still have all these years later. All right, well, listen, Roger, thank you very much. We're going to let you go. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates rejoining our network. And, yeah, Claire and I would like to get back to the mainland, especially with this idea that if we get into a nuclear shooting war with Russia and China, this place will get hit. Maybe not with nukes, but they're going to want to take control of it. Getting on back to the economic news here, there's another problem that is starting to hit these cities where they are deeply in debt and looking at bankruptcy, and that is that the wealthy sector of their population who do have the money to relocate are doing so. There is a huge outflow of wealthy people go very hard. Over 3,000 millionaires have left the city of Chicago in recent months, and obviously they're no longer on the tax rolls. And that's another factor that needs to be brought in, that you can make a city so debt-ridden that the people best able to help you deal with that debt are just going to give up and say, to heck with this, we're getting out of here. Now, the other day we were talking about how a lot of the migrants who came to the United States with the open borders policy, and now they're getting very nervous about being deported because of Donald Trump's crackdown. And they're now sneaking into Canada, and apparently they're using a sports stadium as a temporary facility, and obviously that's not going to do for very well. So now, apparently the Canadian military is building a camp for hundreds of refugees who are crossing into Canada from the United States. Over in Sweden, that little politically correct bastion over there in Europe that loves open borders and hates automobiles, they're now out there saying that white people should stop having so many children. The black people have lots of kids. The brown people have lots of kids. The red people have lots of kids. All of them have lots of kids. You white people, there's too many of you. Stop having so many kids. Not that we're being racist, of course. Along the same lines, over at Cal State LA, there's a professor, Mohammed Abed. He's a tenure-track professor of ethics, social and political philosophy, and classical Islamic philosophy, who is out there saying that the genocide of white racists is morally required. And when you couple that with all these people who are saying that being white makes you automatically racist, we're looking at a Zimbabwe-style genocide in the United States of America. And it's amazing that this is being encouraged by people like George Soros here. Article coming out of Your News Wire. Actually, I'm not going to do that one. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that one. Al Gore is still out there trying to salvage what's left of his reputation and his wealth after the epic fail of his inconvenient sequel, which it was rather interesting. During all the previews, it was getting all these glowing endorsements. Oh, you must see this. This will save the world. And it's made about $1 million so far at the box office, which does not cover its cost of production. It is deeply, deeply in the red. They went all over the world filming this thing. And apparently critics for local newspapers who were not in on this idea that we've got to force this on the people, their reviews have been scathing. Now, a couple of weeks back we were talking about how Al Gore was visiting one of these tiny islands in the Carolinas that is sinking into the sea, and Al Gore was out there saying, see, this proves sea levels are rising, only to have the mayor of the place come on out and say, no, the problem is erosion. The sea levels are not rising. The island is eroding away. Well, it's happened again. This is on Tangier Island in Virginia. And apparently Al Gore was out there about the growing threat of climate change and sea level rise, and he basically went on out. This guy has been a crabber on Tangier Island since 1970. And he's very familiar with the ocean. And he's calling out Al Gore and saying, look, the sea level has not changed at all since 1970. Actually, for oceanographers, it has actually dropped a little tiny bit. Why? Because the ice caps are growing. For some strange reason, the government of Canada is requesting funeral homes to prepare for a pandemic. Now, the health officials are developing plans for a future influenza pandemic, but apparently they're concerned that the next one that's going to hit is going to be really, really bad, and they want to make sure the nation's funeral homes are prepared to take on the added work. Sounds a little scary out there here. Dr. Joel Furman is out there saying, you know, we can reverse most diseases with the right diet. And by the way, he's absolutely true. You would be surprised how many common ailments are caused by your body being too acidic. And certainly here in the United States of America, with all the processed foods and everything else, our diets are heavily acidic. And it can lead to all kinds of problems, one of the major ones being gout. But if you can keep your body slightly alkali, those problems just go away. You don't need to go to the doctors. You don't need to get prescription medication. And one of the best ways to do that are with these high pH waters. This one is Essentia. It's not the only one. There's others out there. And just keeping your pH slightly alkaline, you're simply going to avoid a lot of these things. When I first started getting gout years ago, and I didn't even realize what it was really bad. And I'll still get it occasionally, but drinking this, not a problem anymore. So I imagine this Dr. Furman is not long for this world when you look at the strange way that doctors who come on out defying the orthodoxy of whatever's wrong with you, you will buy a pill for it. And they seem to pass away strangely. We reported on one of them earlier in the week. Now, here's an interesting little story. Apparently, here in the United States of America, the court system has been using a computerized risk assessment that when a accused criminal is going to go to trial, or he's found guilty, they have him fill out all this paperwork, and it calculates a probability of the person reoffending. And this is made available to the judge. And obviously, if this is a one-time only crime and it's not likely that this person will reoffend, the judge is willing to go with probation or suspend the sentence, as opposed to if you're likely to reoffend, they're going to send you away for some hard time. And it's an AI, but they've noticed something very odd, that as it goes along and learns, this AI system seems to be developing a racial bias. And apparently reporters from ProPublica obtained more than 7,000 of these risk assessments from Florida in 2013 and 2014 and analyzed the reoffending rate among the individuals and saw a clear shift. It started to presume that black suspects were more likely to reoffend. Now, maybe there's an analytical reason for it, but it is rather surprising as they start experimenting with these AIs. They're getting some unexpected results, like the two that literally developed their own language, or the one that started learning how to swear. Now, there's a new lawsuit out. Boy, there's a lot of lawsuits out right now. This one is against Disney. Apparently, the Walt Disney Company has about 42 of their apps, and they are secretly collecting personal information on your kids, which they then share, more likely sell with advertisers, without the consent of the parents. And so there's been a class action lawsuit filed against Disney and 3 of their software companies, Upsite, Unity, and Kochava, saying that these apps violate the law by gathering information across the internet about kids under the age of 13 for commercial exploitation. Now, YouTube, in their effort to control controversial content, is now bringing the Anti-Defamation League on board as a flagger, meaning the Anti-Defamation League will now have the button to flag YouTube movies to get them de-emphasized in the search engines or even get them blocked or demonetized. That's YouTube's latest weapon. We're going to demonetize anything. And obviously that means YouTube has now become an Israel-friendly platform. No criticism of Israel will be allowed. No support for Palestinians will be tolerated. And I can already imagine 2 of the music videos that we have made getting flagged by the ADL. We got to take a break for commercials. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go ahead and take a phone call. Wes in Idaho. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thanks for taking my call, Michael. Since the topic is race, I wanted to direct attention to a book on the internet, full text, by Senator Belbo. He was a 3-term senator from Mississippi, twice governor, once lieutenant governor. The name of the book, full text, Take Your Choice, Separation or Mongrelization. He runs down the history of the countries of Egypt, India, Phoenicia, Carthage, Greece, and Rome, and points out there were once at the very top of the heap of civilizations, and they fell down, each one, when they mixed their seed with Nubians. Black race is what he picks on. He calls it.
Okay, well, I understand that's his point of view. But you need to understand that all empires, all nations, do have a life cycle. And it is characterized by there's going to be a people who are newly emergent from their former condition, and they're enthusiastic, and they build a new country, and they're excited, and for generation and generation they work to build their country. Then they start to become complacent, and they start to kick back and say, we're going to enjoy this wonderful life that we have built for ourselves, and they start pulling back, and the government, in order to win votes and stuff, they start handing out more and more stuff. Bread and circuses, gladiatorial games, and in order to fund it all, the government is eventually driven to a program of conquest of other nations' wealth. And then as the nation starts to decline and the people start to get very upset, the government has to become repressive to hang on to power, leading ultimately to either a collapse of the government or a revolution, and then that cycle starts all over again. Now, I understand that from a cultural point of view, when you're blurring all these cultures together, like is going on in Europe, it's causing friction, and the society as a whole is much less efficient than a society where everybody's grown up together, they all speak the same language, they all understand the same cultural symbols and metaphors, and there's no confusion. But from a biological point of view, I don't think interbreeding between the races is going to have that much of an impact. In fact, like any other evolutionary process, I think the end result is hopefully going to be improved over the forebears. But the issue is a little bit more complex than you make it out to be, unfortunately.
The continent of Africa has over 1 billion people. Do they do symphonies? Do they build cars? Do they build airplanes? Do they build aircraft carriers? Do they build computers? Are you going to tell me they're equal to the white race? All of Europe, USA, Canada, Sweden builds 100,000 cars and airplanes and buses and trucks every year. 10 million people. Sweden is just 10 million people. Do you like Husqvarna rifles? Do
Okay,
you like
Wes, there may be another factor here, okay? And that is that maybe Africa doesn't have all the money junkies that are behind the building of the factories and the artificial creation of the need for these products in the general population. And it may be another way to be, it may just be a different approach to life. And it doesn't necessarily make them inferior. In fact, if you look at the problems of toxic pollution over in Japan, how many workers are committing suicide and everything, you know, maybe more of a laid-back, casual African approach to these things is what's leading to longer life. And by the way, there is industry in Africa. It's not like a black and white situation. They may not have all that we do, but they are industrializing down there. Anyway, Wes, we're going to take a commercial break. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. And as we head on down to the commercial break, apparently scientists have actually hacked a computer using malware encoded on DNA. So from now on, when they talk about a computer virus, they aren't fooling. We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I want to make a point here because I'm getting some email in response to Wes, both supportive and condemnation as well here. Our respective cultures, our technology, if you will, was controlled by the environment in which we were evolving. Down in Africa, food is available year-round. That's not true in the northern latitudes where you've got to plan for winter, you've got to deal with winter, which forced the beginnings of agriculture, which tied people down in a single location, village, and basically began that process of more and more organization, because it was necessary to survive. And it wasn't really needed down in Africa, so it didn't happen. It's not in our DNA. It's the environment in which we grew up in. And as a final comment before we go back to the phones here, I'm looking at this article in Russia Today, basically saying that new evidence has surfaced that during the Ice Age, those nice Britons engaged in ritual cannibalism. They found a cave full of bones and indications that these are humans who were eaten by other humans, and after the meal was over, the bones were carved with decorations. And many societies, in fact, if you look at every major group of humans on this planet, and you go back far enough, they've all gone through a cannibal phase. So don't get smug about your society and the others as well. All right, we're going to go back to taking phone calls. Robin in Illinois, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, thanks, Mike. Hey, towards the top of the hour, you brought up Obamacare, the ACHA, and about penalties.
Yes.
People not paying the penalties. Can you bring that story up again?
Well, I was just mentioning that 6.5 million Americans have simply decided that they're not going to bother with the Obamacare policies, and they're just going to go ahead and pay the IRS penalty.
Okay, well, the first thing that came to mind was, didn't Trump, and it's been in effect for a couple months now that I believe, that he did an order on that. I forget now.
He did, well, basically,
an executive order.
He did, and then the IRS said they were going to go along with it, and then all of a sudden we find out, no, they were still assessing it. It's another way in which officialdom of Washington is ignoring the president.
Okay, well, in that case, there's a secondary to this. I heard the other day, and now I'm going to read this off for you to confirm and your audience to confirm. Okay, I'm just planting a seed here. In the ACHA, Title 26, Chapter 41, Statute 5000A, scroll down to G for golf, Section 1 and 2, it states in there under the income tax, if you do not take the ACHA, the government cannot take a lien or put a levy on you. Interpretation of that is it's 100% voluntary.
Well, it should be, and may have been one of the many lies we were told. Remember, if you like your plan, you can keep your plan. It does sound like that the IRS penalty for not having an Obamacare compliant policy violates the letter of the act itself.
well, like I said, I just read out those numbers. It takes you and your audience to like cross-reference this. This could be wrong because I got this from another source, but no one's disputed it as of yet.
Okay, would you email me that citation again, because I'm not going to be able to remember it, and I'll try and hunt that down, because if that is really there, it's important people understand that. But again, we have a government that does not play by the rules, and I'll give you a good example. Everybody's talking about a renewed military draft to send our kids off to everywhere to be killed and crippled. It's a violation of the 13th Amendment. The involuntary servitude amendment. You cannot be forced to do something that you don't want to do by the government unless you've committed a crime for which they will prosecute you. The draft is actually unconstitutional, but they have some rigmarole to get around it. Okay, Rob, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Alex. We're going to switch over to Alex in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, the gentleman that just called, I just wanted to make a comment. I could be wrong, but I think that I'm correct on that. What that is saying is that you don't have to take the government tax credit, meaning the assistance, the subsidy, helping you pay for your health plan every year. It does not say that you will not be penalized if you don't get coverage. Because there's some people that don't want the government to help them pay for their health insurance.
Yeah.
They don't want anything to do with the government. I think that that's what he was stating in that last comment. I don't believe that there's any place that says you will not be penalized if you do not get a plan. They're trying to penalize you for that. Anyway, I was calling because I heard InfoWars last night talking like it was a big win for the fact that Hillary may be having to do a plea bargain pretty soon for her email private server and stuff. And they were acting like it was a big win. But from hearing you yesterday, I believe you were saying that you think that it's actually bad for us because they would just fine her on a misdemeanor and basically slap her hand and let the corruption continue. Did you hear? What are your thoughts on that?
I wish Alex would pay a little closer attention to what is going on before he goes on out there and misinforms a bunch of people. But the plea deal, as I've heard it, is that Hillary will agree to sign a document that she did commit a minor violation in the handling of classified documents, and in exchange, all investigations and prosecutions into the email server will be dropped, along with all the investigations into the pay-for-play at the State Department. And I think the only reason they're doing this is because everyone's been screaming about all the work and time and money being put into this investigation into Russia interfering with the election last year, and there are all these crimes Hillary did, and there's no investigation. So they're going through this little dog and pony show to say, see, we've investigated Hillary, and we got her on this one little tiny crime, so you should be just happy, and let's go back and now go back after Trump and Russia. That's what this is really all about. It's a wrist slap. She's not going to go to jail for any of this thing. She's not going to be convicted of a felony, which means she can run for the White House again.
Well, there was one positive note that they mentioned on InfoWars, basically stating that would not eliminate the possibility for international cases against her, suits filed against her, which that would be a positive thing, maybe, but the way everything works, it's like you say, it's going to be a little slap on the hand, go stand in the corner until after the first 15 minutes, and you can come sit back down and color.
Well, the problem with this idea about international lawsuits against the Clinton Foundation is the people on the other side, the people who were sending the money to corrupt the system, they don't want any publicity. And we had an article that came out earlier in the week saying that the rest of the world that was involved with the Clinton Foundation, they don't want any more investigations than the Clintons themselves do. That's not going to happen. What should really happen is, we know Charles Ortel has come on out and confirmed it over and over again, that the Clinton Foundation spent only about 5% of their revenues on actual charitable work. Now, the rules for a 501c3 say that you have to spend 51% of your revenues on charitable work to keep your 501c3 status. So what the Internal Revenue Service really ought to be doing, and we're not seeing them make a move on this, is yank that 501c3 status. That would make the Clintons themselves personally liable for all the taxes on all the money in the Clinton Foundation.
Yes.
And you're not going to see that happen either.
I'm going to be pissed if Hillary just gets a spank on the hand. Or Susan Rice or Loretta Lynch. They're probably going to include all of them. Comey, every one of them. They're probably going to include every one of them because they're all the same. McCain. There's only one party. You know that. I mean,
it's the narcocracy. It's the narco party. It's the narco party. And that's why Hillary's not going to be touched, because all she has to do is stand there and say, if you hit me with a real charge and a real prosecution, I'm going to go on national TV and tell them all about how the CIA was running guns and drugs out of Arkansas when Bill Clinton was governor there, and how all these people in Washington, D.C. are dipping into that flow of cash, that drug money. And it's a valid threat. Right now, the federal government is very fragile. It wouldn't take much to have the American people just absolutely just say, I'm not going to listen to you guys anymore. I'm not going to pay any taxes. I'm not going to fill out your paperwork. Just go away.
Yeah, we need to quit following their orders. We need to basically stick together. David Icke says we all have to get together and understand that it's not politics. It's right and wrong, and they're wrong.
Exactly.
Democrats and Republicans, they're wrong. We need to stick together.
They're criminals.
And we need to they are criminals, and they need to be prosecuted for the crimes that they did. And we need. I think there will be a big outcry if they let her go. I
think there will be as well, and I'm certainly going to be out there leading the charge on that one. You know, another wrist slap. I mean,
yeah. And they're acting like we'll be lucky to get that much, and it's just unfortunate and disgusting. Actually, do you mind if I tell you one thing about the DNC lawsuit that I heard the other day?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I heard there was an interview with Elizabeth Beck. She's one of the wife of the attorney that she's the spouse of the lawsuit, one of the lawyers. And she was saying that there was information on the Mayo Clinic that was released from WikiLeaks showing that, like, Dick Cheney, George Bush, Tom Brokaw, she named about 7 or 8 people, like, involved possibly in organ, what's it called, organ trafficking?
Yeah.
In Jacksonville, Florida. Did you ever hear anything about that?
No, I didn't. And I got to be very honest, those don't sound like the kind of people who would want to be involved in that particular thing. But then who really knows? But again, I will say we have to be very, very careful because the government, the narcocracy, the corporate media, they're trying to plant some bogus stuff on the independent media in the hope we'll run with it. And then we can be embarrassed or even better, sued out of existence. So we have to be very, very careful. I would want a second source on that one.
Yeah, well, this was actually from her mouth. I believe it was, I forget which independent journalist was interviewing her, but she actually almost broke down into tears when she was talking about it. And it came from her mouth. It wasn't second source.
Can you send me that article, the URL to that article, and I'll take a look?
I'm going to try to look it up. It was on YouTube. I'll try to look it up and get it to you. I probably won't be able to find it for a little bit, but I will get it over to you.
All right, thank you.
And one more thing. I think if ACA plans don't enforce people to pay if they don't get a health plan, that will be the nail in the coffin. They need that money. The CEOs have to make that $150 million a year, and that would basically destroy that.
Okay, well, you're right. Unfortunately, I think a lot of Americans they're actually just starting to get used to the idea that our society is hopelessly corrupt, and that's becoming the new normal. And people really do need to start allowing themselves to become angry. One of the big problems, of course, are all these areas where fluoride is being added to the drinking water because it is a minor tranquilizer. And that may be the only reason we haven't seen more violence in the streets of America, other than the bought and paid for kind coming from Soros and his people. Okay, Alex, thanks an awful lot for the information.
Thank you.
And we're going to let you go here right now. All right, we're coming up here on the, well, we're almost to the end of the show here. Now, over at Consumer Reports, this is kind of a weird story. Apparently, Consumer Reports was recommending the Microsoft Surface, and they came on out. And then all of a sudden, they started getting complaints about problems with the devices. There have always been prices with these things. I think the red warning sign was when they were trying to sell the Surface as a fashion accessory rather than a computer. Remember the commercials? The kids are all dancing around and they're snapping the things back and forth in rhythm. And they don't even talk about what the computer itself actually does. It's just the bright colors and the dancing and being hip. And anytime they market technological equipment as a fashion accessory, you've got to be very, very careful. But apparently Consumer Reports is now pulling their positive recommendations following all the complaints of problems. And as of just the last couple of days, it says it can no longer recommend Microsoft laptops or tablets because of poor reliability compared to other brands. Now, here is my question. Just how did it come to be that Consumer Reports initially had a positive recommendation? Because I was always under the impression that Consumer Reports was an independent testing evaluation group. But apparently, somebody was willing to sell Microsoft a positive recommendation, and now they've embarrassed themselves. And again, another hallmark of fascism. You can sell a lousy product as long as you've got the juice in the media to keep the problems covered up, like Monsanto's been doing with glyphosate, and you've got enough pull with the government to, in many cases, make the products mandatory, like the vaccine makers do. And if the government forces customers to buy your product and the media won't report on the problems with those products, then there's no incentive to make a better product. In both the case of vaccines and computers, they are indemnified from civil litigation related to damage caused by their products. And that is a nightmare for the consumer. And it shouldn't be that way. Now, in the case of the computers, obviously, it goes back to the early days of the Commodore VIC-20 and the 64, when computers were a fragile new industry and they did need to be protected. But that's 30 years ago, and computers are big business. They shouldn't be protected from being sued when they put out bad hardware and bad software. We're going to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And somebody has sent me a link to an article about this organ harvesting and the Clinton Foundation and the Mayo Clinic. And apparently this goes back to what happened in Haiti following the earthquake. I'm still looking through the article, but that's apparently where this came from. I don't know that these other people who were named by the caller are involved with this. Again, yeah, there's a lot of dark stuff going on out there. Getting on back to the world of computers, there is apparently a lawsuit being filed against Donald Trump by people he has blocked from his Twitter account. Because apparently they got onto Donald Trump's Twitter feed and they said some very unkind things. And that's the reason Twitter has a blocking feature, so that you can stop people who are inaccurate or just there to cause trouble. But the lawsuit is charging that because Trump is the president, his Twitter feed represents an official channel of communication, and therefore they have a First Amendment right to be there and shout ridicule and abuse as much as they want. Now, a little clarification on the First Amendment. The First Amendment grants us all a right to freedom of speech. But it doesn't guarantee a right that you can go anywhere you want with it. You can get out on any public space and you have freedom of speech. You certainly have freedom of speech in your own home, your own website, your own Twitter feed, your own Facebook page. Your First Amendment right to freedom of speech does not give you the right to go into other people's spaces to cause trouble. And that is the way it is. Again, earlier in the show, the Hillary Super PAC admitted they are paying people to be online trolls. And that probably includes a lot of the people who are on Donald Trump's Twitter feed shouting all kinds of nonsense at him, which, if he's like me, he's not reading it anyway. I'll post to Twitter. I don't read the feedback. And there is a lot of nonsense posted there. I've had people over the years write to me and demand that I post articles about absolutely absurd nonsense, saying they have a First Amendment right to have their point of view at whatreallyhappened.com. No, you don't. You have a First Amendment right to set up your own web page and put whatever you want in it. So, Cassini, which has been doing amazing stuff out by Saturn, is starting on its final 5 orbits before it plunges into the planet's atmosphere. And, of course, the closer they get, the more interesting data they're getting, because they're willing to risk the ship, because it's going to be destroyed soon anyway, so they can take chances that they normally wouldn't have been taking before. Now, I've been going out before sunrise here and taking a look at the sky, and I have to be very honest, I am not impressed with the Perseids so far. There was all this hype about the best Perseids in 120 years. I don't think it even comes up to the 1993 one. But we'll keep trying. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here and get some useful things done with the rest of the day. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. He's got a lot of interesting things to talk about. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. So until then, aloha, America.